The morning briefing hall buzzed with tension as academy instructors filed into their seats. Cara Dumont sat near the back, her worn leather jacket standing out among the sleek alien uniforms. She had been teaching combat tactics at the Galactic Military Academy for 3 years now, and she recognized the energy in the room. Something big was about to happen. Commander Xuexthal entered through the main doors, his 4 arms carrying multiple data tablets. The Vrexian officer was tall, nearly 8 feet, with silver skin that reflected the overhead lights. He moved to the podium with measured steps, his face unreadable. "Thank you all for attending this emergency session," Xuexthal began, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into standard galactic speech. "We have received formal complaints from several member species regarding training protocols." Cara leaned forward slightly. She had a feeling she knew where this was going. "Specifically," the commander continued, "concerns have been raised about the use of projectile weapons in combat training. Multiple incidents have occurred where students suffered injuries from bullet fragments and ricochets. The Council of Educational Standards has reviewed these cases." Senior Instructor Varkesh, a massive Thraxian with gray-scaled skin and ridged facial plates, stood up from his seat in the front row. He did not wait for permission to speak. "Commander, if I may," Varkesh said, his deep voice carrying easily through the hall. "These incidents all originated from one particular training program. The human program." He turned slightly, making sure everyone could see him gesture toward Cara. "Perhaps it is time we acknowledge that primitive Earth weapons have no place in a modern military academy." Several instructors nodded in agreement. Cara kept her expression neutral, though her jaw tightened slightly. Xuexthal raised one hand for silence. "The Council has made their decision. Effective immediately, all projectile weapons are banned from training exercises. This includes any device that uses chemical propellants or electromagnetic acceleration to launch solid ammunition." Varkesh's lipless mouth curved into what passed for a smile among his people. He had been trying to undermine the human combat program since Cara arrived. The Thraxians specialized in energy weapons and plasma blade combat. He considered anything else outdated and worthless. "This is a wise decision, Commander," Varkesh said, still standing. "Modern warfare requires modern solutions. Energy shields, plasma weapons, kinetic barriers, these are the tools of professional soldiers. Not explosive powder and metal bullets from some backwater planet." Cara stood up slowly. Every eye in the room turned to her. She was shorter than almost everyone present, barely 5'6", with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. But something in the way she carried herself made people pay attention. "I understand the decision, Commander," Cara said calmly. "Student safety is obviously the priority. I will adjust my training curriculum accordingly." Varkesh looked surprised. He had clearly expected an argument, maybe even anger. Instead, Cara simply nodded respectfully to the commander and sat back down. The Thraxian was not satisfied with such an easy victory. "You accept this without protest?" he asked, turning fully to face her. "I thought humans were supposed to be stubborn about their primitive traditions." Cara met his gaze without blinking. "Rules are rules, Senior Instructor. If the Academy says no projectile weapons, then we will not use projectile weapons. I am sure we can find other ways to prepare students for combat." "Other ways?" Varkesh laughed, a harsh sound like grinding stones. "What will you teach them now? How to throw rocks? Perhaps hit enemies with sticks?" A few other instructors chuckled. Cara just smiled slightly, a small expression that did not quite reach her eyes. "I will adapt," she said simply. "That is what humans do best." The briefing continued with other academy business, but Varkesh kept glancing back at Cara throughout the session. Her calm acceptance bothered him more than anger would have. He knew humans well enough to understand they rarely gave up so easily. After the briefing ended, Cara walked out of the hall without speaking to anyone. She made her way through the academy's gleaming corridors, past training rooms where students practiced with energy weapons and holographic combat scenarios. The facility was impressive, built by a dozen different species over the past century. It represented the best military technology the galaxy had to offer. Cara's own office was small and cluttered compared to the sleek alien spaces. Books lined the shelves, actual paper books from Earth. Training manuals, history texts, tactical analyses. She had always been a reader, even as a child growing up in Seattle. She sat down at her desk and pulled up her personal data terminal. Her fingers moved quickly across the holographic keyboard as she accessed the Academy's library system. Most instructors never bothered with the historical archives. They focused on current technology and modern tactics. But Kara had spent countless hours exploring the vast collection of military history from hundreds of worlds. "Computer, show me Earth military archives," she said aloud. "Specifically, pre-gunpowder weapons development." The screen filled with options. Medieval Europe, ancient China, classical Rome, feudal Japan. Every human civilization that had ever developed weapons before the invention of firearms. Kara's smile grew wider as she scrolled through the listings. The Academy's new rule was very specific. No devices using chemical propellants or electromagnetic acceleration. That definition covered guns, railguns, Gauss rifles, and similar modern weapons. But it said nothing about weapons that relied on simpler mechanical principles. She opened a file on medieval European warfare and began reading. Crossbows, longbows, trebuchets, ballistas. Weapons that had dominated battlefields for thousands of years before gunpowder changed everything. Weapons that used tension, leverage, and basic physics rather than explosives or electricity. Her terminal chimed with an incoming message. It was from Mikhail Torres, her teaching assistant and one of only 3 other humans at the Academy. The message was brief. "Heard about the new rule. You okay?" Kara typed back quickly. "Better than okay. Meet me at the Earth Artifact Storage Bay in 1 hour. Bring measuring tape and a notepad." She leaned back in her chair, thinking through possibilities. The Academy trained students from dozens of different species in modern combat techniques. They learned to use energy shields that could stop plasma bolts and kinetic rounds. They practiced with weapons that could punch through reinforced armor at incredible distances. They studied tactics designed for battles fought with advanced technology. But how many of them had ever faced a weapon that was 1,000 years old? How many of their energy shields were programmed to detect and stop a wooden arrow flying at a fraction of the speed of a bullet? How many tactical simulations included attacks from siege weapons that relied on counterweights and tension rather than power cells? Kara opened another file, this one showing crossbow designs from Earth's 10th century. The weapons were elegant in their simplicity. A bow mounted horizontally on a stock, with a mechanical trigger to release the string. No explosives, no electronics, no chemical propellants. Just wood, metal, and physics. "No projectile weapons," she murmured to herself, still smiling. "Technically, Senior Instructor, you are absolutely correct. We will not be using any modern projectile weapons." She began making notes, sketching rough diagrams and calculating measurements. The Academy's fabrication labs could create almost anything if given proper specifications. And the Earth Historical Archives contained detailed plans for weapons that had been tested in actual combat for centuries. By the time Mikhail arrived at her office an hour later, Kara had filled 3 pages with designs and ideas. The young man looked curious and slightly worried. "What are you planning?" he asked. Kara turned her terminal so he could see the crossbow schematics on the screen. "An education," she said. "For everyone who thinks human weapons are primitive and outdated. Starting with Senior Instructor Varkesh." The training hall fell silent as Kara walked through the doors carrying something nobody recognized. 3 wooden objects rested in her arms, each about 3 feet long with a distinctive curved shape at one end. Behind her, Mikhail pushed a cart loaded with more of the strange devices and what looked like short metal arrows. Cadet Raisha, a Kelmorian with blue-tinted skin and large black eyes, leaned over to whisper to her partner. "What are those things? They look like children's toys." "Attention, cadets," Kara called out, setting the wooden objects on the demonstration table. "I know you have all heard about the new Academy regulations regarding projectile weapons. As of last week, we can no longer use firearms, railguns, or any similar devices in our training." A few students exchanged glances. They had been wondering how the human instructor would handle the ban. Most assumed she would switch to teaching energy weapons like every other combat instructor. "However," Kara continued, picking up one of the wooden devices, "the regulation is very specific. It bans weapons using chemical propellants or electromagnetic acceleration. These weapons do neither." She held up the object for everyone to see. It had a wooden stock like a rifle, but instead of a barrel, it had a horizontal bow mounted at the front. A string was pulled tight across the bow, held in place by a mechanical trigger mechanism. "This is called a crossbow," Kara explained. "Humans developed it around the year 1000 AD on Earth. That was more than 1,000 years before we invented gunpowder weapons. It works using simple mechanical tension. You pull back this string, it stores energy, and when you pull the trigger it releases an arrow called a bolt." Raisha raised her hand hesitantly. "Instructor Dumont, with respect, how is an ancient wooden weapon relevant to modern combat training? We face enemies with plasma rifles and particle beams." Kara smiled. An excellent question, Cadet. Mikhail, please bring out the test shield. Her assistant wheeled forward a standard military energy shield generator, the kind every soldier in the galactic forces carried. He activated it, and a shimmering blue barrier appeared in the air, roughly 6 feet tall and 4 feet wide. This shield can stop plasma bolts, kinetic rounds, and even small explosives, Kara said. It detects incoming projectiles moving at high velocity and creates a barrier dense enough to absorb their energy. The faster something moves, the stronger the shield responds. She picked up one of the bolts from the cart. It was about 10 inches long, made of metal with simple fletching at one end. Nothing sophisticated, nothing high-tech. Just a pointed piece of metal. The problem, Kara continued, loading the bolt into the crossbow, is that these shields are designed for modern weapons. They expect threats moving at supersonic speeds. A bullet from a rifle travels around 3,000 feet per second. A plasma bolt moves even faster. She raised the crossbow to her shoulder, aiming at the shield. This bolt will travel at roughly 300 feet per second. 10 times slower than a bullet. Watch carefully. Kara pulled the trigger. The crossbow made a sharp twang sound as the string released. The bolt flew across the room in a smooth arc and passed straight through the energy shield as if it was not even there. It buried itself in the reinforced wall behind with a solid thunk. The training hall erupted in shocked whispers. Raisha stood up from her seat, her eyes wide. It went through. The shield did not even react. Exactly, Kara said, lowering the crossbow. The shield sensors did not recognize the bolt as a threat. It was moving too slowly. The defensive program thought it was debris or a thrown object, not a weapon. A large cadet named Thorn, whose species had thick armored skin, raised his clawed hand. But Instructor, this is just one weakness. Surely our enemies would not use such primitive weapons. Kara walked over to the shield generator and adjusted its settings. You are right, Cadet Thorn. Once shield manufacturers know about this weakness, they will update their programs. But here is the real lesson. She turned to face the class. Every technology has vulnerabilities. Every advancement creates new blind spots. The species that win battles are the ones who find those blind spots first. She gestured to Mikhail, who began handing out crossbows to the students. Over the next 2 weeks, you will learn to use these weapons. Not because we want you to fight with crossbows in actual combat, but because we want you to think differently. Modern warfare is not just about having the best technology. It is about understanding weaknesses in your enemy's technology. The cadets examined the crossbows with growing interest. Raisha ran her fingers along the wooden stock, feeling the grain of the wood. How much training does it take to use one effectively? A human saying goes, to train a longbowman, start with his grandfather, Kara replied. But crossbows are different. They are easier to learn. In medieval Earth, a peasant could become dangerous with a crossbow after just a few weeks of practice. That is why they changed warfare. She spent the next hour teaching basic crossbow operation. How to load the bolt, how to cock the string using the built-in lever, how to aim without electronic sights. The alien students struggled at first. They were used to weapons that did most of the work for them, weapons with computer targeting and automatic range finding. Why do I have to calculate the drop myself? Complained a Zathrian cadet named Plex, his tentacles waving in frustration. My plasma rifle tells me exactly where to aim. Because your plasma rifle can be hacked, Kara answered. Its targeting computer can be jammed. Its power cell can run dry. But this, she tapped the crossbow in his tentacles, cannot be disabled by electronic warfare. It will work in an electromagnetic pulse field. It will work underwater. It will work in zero gravity with slight adjustments. It is technology that cannot be turned off. By the end of the first session, most students had managed to hit the practice targets at least once. It was crude compared to their usual accuracy with energy weapons, but Kara could see them starting to understand. Over the following days, word spread through the academy. Other instructors stopped by to watch the unusual training sessions. Some laughed at the sight of cadets using wooden weapons. Others watched more thoughtfully, especially after Kara demonstrated the shield penetration trick repeatedly. Senior Instructor Varkesh appeared on the third day, standing in the observation gallery above the training floor. He watched for 20 minutes as Raisha successfully shot 5 bolts through an active energy shield, each one hitting close to the center target. Interesting parlor trick, he called down. But how does this prepare students for real combat? Kara looked up at him. Come down and find out, Senior Instructor. I will give you full body armor and an energy shield. Standard military equipment. Then I will shoot at you with this 1,000-year-old weapon. We can see how primitive it really is. The Thraxian's scales rippled, a sign of annoyance among his people. I have more important duties than playing your games, human? Of course, Kara said mildly. The offer stands whenever you have time. Varkesh left without responding, but Kara noticed he looked troubled. By the end of the second week, her class had grown. Students from other combat programs started requesting permission to attend. They had heard about the weapons that could bypass shields and they wanted to learn. Even some instructors quietly asked Kara for information about where to find crossbow specifications. Mikhail found it amusing. 2 weeks ago, everyone thought we were finished, he said as they packed up equipment after a particularly successful training session. Now half the academy wants to learn medieval warfare. Kara loaded the last crossbow into its storage case. People respect what works, she said. And they fear what they do not understand. Right now, every student with an energy shield is wondering what else might pass right through their defenses. She closed the case and looked around the training hall. In just 14 days she had turned a weapons ban into an opportunity. The cadets were learning to think creatively, to question their assumptions about technology, to understand that newer was not always better. The academy tournament arena was packed with spectators. Students, instructors, and even visiting military officials filled the stands overlooking the massive combat floor. The annual tournament was one of the academy's most important events, where teams competed in simulated battle scenarios to prove their tactical training. Kara stood with her team in the preparation area, checking equipment one final time. She had entered 6 students: Raisha, Mikhail, Thorn, and 3 others who had excelled in crossbow training. They wore standard combat armor but carried no energy weapons. Instead, each had a crossbow, a quiver of bolts, and a simple sword at their hip. Instructor, the other teams are laughing at us, Thorn said quietly, his armored head turning toward the nearby preparation areas. They think we are joking. Let them laugh, Kara replied, tightening the strap on Raisha's quiver. They will understand soon enough. Across the preparation zone, Varkesh supervised his own team with obvious confidence. He had selected 8 of the academy's best students, all equipped with top-tier plasma rifles, energy shields, and thermal scanners. His team had won the tournament 3 years running, and he clearly expected a 4th victory. The Thraxian instructor caught Kara's eye and walked over with heavy steps. Human, you actually intend to send your students into combat with those toys? This is a serious competition, not a history demonstration. Kara looked up at him calmly. The rules allow any weapons that comply with academy safety standards. These crossbows have been approved by the tournament committee. Approved because nobody thought anyone would be foolish enough to actually use them, Varkesh said, his scales rippling with amusement. When my team eliminates yours in the first 5 minutes, perhaps you will finally understand why modern weapons replaced your primitive tools. Perhaps, Kara said simply. Good luck, senior instructor. Varkesh snorted and returned to his team, clearly dismissing the entire conversation as irrelevant. He had bigger concerns than some human instructor's doomed experiment. The tournament announcer's voice boomed across the arena. First match, Team Varkesh against Team Dumont. Scenario: capture the flag. Standard rules apply. Teams have 5 minutes to reach positions before combat begins. The combat floor was a complex environment designed to simulate urban warfare. Buildings, walls, barriers, and obstacles created a maze of potential firing positions and hiding spots. Each team's flag was placed at opposite ends of the arena, protected by a force field that would drop when the match officially started. Kara's team moved quickly to their starting position. Remember the plan, she said quietly. They will expect us to defend our flag. Instead, we go on offense immediately. Spread out, use cover, and aim for body shots. Do not waste bolts trying for headshots. What about their shields? Asked a cadet named Sophie, nervousness clear in her voice. Their shields will not help them, Raisha answered confidently. She had become the team's best shot over the past weeks. Trust the instructor. Trust the weapons. The countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The force fields dropped and the match started. Varkesh's team advanced in perfect formation, their plasma rifles raised and energy shields activated. They moved with professional precision, clearly planning to establish a defensive perimeter before pushing forward. It was textbook tactics for this type of scenario. They were halfway to the center of the arena when the first bolt hit. The team's point scout, a tall Meridian with excellent vision, suddenly stumbled backward with a crossbow bolt buried in his chest armor. The impact was not enough to seriously injure him through the armor, but the hit registered on his suit's sensors. He was officially eliminated, his armor locking up according to tournament rules. "Contact," someone on Varkesh's team shouted. Where did that come from? 3 more bolts flew from different directions. One hit a shield and bounced off, but 2 others found gaps in the formation. 2 more cadets went down, their armor systems declaring them eliminated. Varkesh's voice crackled over his team's communication channel. "Energy shields forward. Suppress their position." His remaining 5 students raised their shields and began firing plasma bolts toward the buildings where the attacks had originated. The energy weapons lit up the arena with bright blue flashes, creating an impressive display of firepower. But Kara's team was already gone, having moved to new positions immediately after shooting. The plasma fire hit empty walls and windows, wasting energy and revealing the shooters' positions. Another volley of crossbow bolts came from the opposite direction. Thorn had climbed to a high position using his natural strength, giving him a perfect angle over the enemy shields. His bolt struck a Zathrian cadet in the shoulder joint where armor was thinnest. Eliminated. "Their shields are useless," someone on Varkesh's team shouted in panic. "The bolts just go through." "Impossible." Varkesh roared from the observation area. He could not communicate with his team during the match, but everyone could hear his anger echoing through the arena. The crowd had gone silent, watching in disbelief as the primitive weapons carved through the advanced team. Raisha led Mikhail and Sophie in a flanking maneuver, using medieval tactics Kara had taught them from Earth's historical battles. They moved quietly without electronic equipment to give away their positions. Their crossbows did not emit energy signatures that thermal scanners could detect. The remaining 4 members of Varkesh's team bunched together, trying to protect each other with overlapping shields. It was a good defensive position against energy weapons, but it made them a perfect target for coordinated crossbow fire. "Now," Raisha whispered into her communicator. 6 bolts flew simultaneously from 3 different directions. The concentrated fire overwhelmed the defensive position. 3 cadets went down immediately. The last one, trying to retreat, took a bolt in the back from Thorn's elevated position. Varkesh's entire team was eliminated in less than 4 minutes. Kara's team secured the enemy flag without opposition and returned to their base for the victory. The arena erupted in confused noise. Some spectators cheered the unexpected upset. Others argued loudly about whether the crossbow should be allowed. Commander Zhuexthal stood in the tournament control booth, his 4 arms crossed as he reviewed data on multiple screens. Tournament officials surrounded him, all talking at once. "Commander, this is clearly against the spirit of the rules," one official argued. "Projectile weapons are banned. The specific regulation bans chemical propellants and electromagnetic acceleration," Zhuexthal replied, his translator keeping his voice calm despite the chaos. "These weapons use neither. They are mechanical tension devices. But they are primitive. Outdated. Primitive or not, they are compliant with current regulations," the commander said firmly. "And clearly effective." Varkesh stormed into the control booth, his scales dark with anger. "This is a mockery of military training. She is making fools of us with children's toys. Children's toys that just eliminated your elite team in under 5 minutes, Zhuexthal observed. "Perhaps the mockery is not where you think it is, senior instructor." The Thraxian's mouth opened and closed several times without sound. Finally, he pointed one clawed finger at the arena floor where Kara was congratulating her team. "She found a loophole. A technicality. This proves nothing about real combat effectiveness." "Actually," Zhuexthal said quietly, "it proves something very important. It proves that assumptions about technological superiority can be deadly. Every student watching this match just learned that their expensive shields have a vulnerability they never considered. That is a valuable lesson." Other matches continued throughout the day, but everyone was talking about the first upset. Teams that had mocked Kara's methods now studied crossbow tactics carefully. Instructors who had supported the weapons ban now quietly asked about training materials for medieval warfare. By the end of the day, Kara's team had advanced to the finals, defeating 2 more opponents with similar tactics. Their final match would be tomorrow against the defending champions from the previous year. As Kara left the arena that evening, she found a message waiting on her data terminal. It was from Varkesh and it was brief. "Instructor duel. You and me. Medieval weapons if you have the courage. Loser resigns from the academy." Kara read the message twice then smiled slightly. She had been wondering how long it would take for the proud Thraxian to issue a direct challenge. She typed her response with steady fingers. "Accepted. Name the time and place." The challenge became official within hours. Commander Zhuxthal tried to discourage it, explaining that instructor duels were outdated traditions rarely invoked anymore, but both Kara and Varkesh insisted. The academy rules were clear: any instructor could challenge another to settle disputes through combat, with terms agreed upon by both parties. The entire academy knew about the duel by morning. Students whispered about it between classes. Instructors debated whether Kara had any chance against a Thraxian in close combat. The betting pools gave her terrible odds. "This is insane," Mikhail said as he helped Kara prepare in her quarters 3 days before the scheduled duel. "Varkesh is 8 feet tall and probably weighs 400 pounds. He has natural armor plating and reflexes twice as fast as yours." Kara was examining a collection of practice swords laid out on her desk. She picked up a long sword, testing its weight and balance. "He is also used to fighting with energy weapons and modern combat techniques. He has probably never faced someone trained in actual medieval swordsmanship." "Have you?" Mikhail asked pointedly. Kara smiled. 20 years of tournament fighting back on Earth. European longsword, specifically the German school of combat. I competed in the historical European martial arts circuit before I joined the military. She performed a quick series of practice cuts with the sword, her movements smooth and controlled. "I even won the international championship twice." "That was against other humans," Mikhail protested. "Varkesh is alien. Different physiology, different strengths." "True," Kara admitted. "But physics still works the same way. Leverage, timing, technique, these things matter more than raw strength in sword fighting. That is why a smaller fighter can defeat a larger one if they know what they are doing." She set down the long sword and picked up another, slightly longer with a different crossguard design. "The real question is endurance. Thraxians are built for short, explosive bursts of activity. They are ambush predators by evolution. Humans are persistence hunters. We can keep going long after other species would collapse from exhaustion." Over the next 3 days, Kara trained intensively. She ran the academy's obstacle courses to maintain her cardiovascular conditioning. She practiced cuts and guards and footwork until her muscles remembered every movement instinctively. She studied videos of Thraxian physiology, learning where their joints bent and where their natural armor was weakest. Raisha volunteered to help with training, wearing padded armor and trying to simulate how Varkesh might fight. "He will use his reach advantage," she said, swinging a long practice pole at Kara. "He will try to keep you at distance." Kara deflected the strike and stepped inside Raisha's guard. "Then I close distance quickly. Force him to fight where his size becomes a disadvantage rather than an advantage." The day of the duel arrived. The main arena had been prepared according to the agreed rules. All energy weapons and electronic systems were disabled in the combat zone. This would be pure melee combat, just as Varkesh had demanded. The stands filled early, packed with spectators. This was not part of the regular tournament. This was personal. 2 instructors fighting for their positions at the academy, using weapons that most species had abandoned centuries ago. Kara entered the arena floor wearing light armor, nothing too heavy that would slow her down. She carried her chosen longsword, a replica of a 15th century German design. The blade was 3.5 feet of spring steel, sharp enough to cut but not lethal with proper safety protocols in place. Their armor would prevent serious injury, but hits would still hurt. Varkesh stood at the opposite end, towering and imposing in his traditional Thraxian combat gear. He carried a massive 2-handed weapon that looked like a cross between a sword and an axe, designed for his species' natural strength and reach. Although plasma blades were his specialty, he had trained with traditional weapons as part of his military background. Commander Zhuxthal stood at the center of the arena, equidistant from both fighters. "This is an official instructor duel," he announced, his voice amplified across the arena. "The terms are clear. This fight continues until one combatant yields, is rendered unable to continue, or until I declare a winner. The loser will resign their position at this academy. Do both parties acknowledge these terms?" "Acknowledged," Kara said clearly. "Acknowledged," Varkesh rumbled. "Then take your positions." Both fighters moved to marked circles 20 feet apart. Kara held her sword in a middle guard position, the blade angled forward and slightly up. Varkesh gripped his weapon with both hands, raising it high in an overhead stance. "Begin." Varkesh charged immediately, trying to use his superior speed and strength to end the fight quickly. His weapon came down in a massive overhead chop that would have split a human in half without armor. Kara was already moving before the strike fell. She sidestepped smoothly, letting the heavy blade crash into the arena floor where she had been standing a moment before. While Varkesh recovered from the powerful swing, she struck at his exposed side. Her long sword rang against his natural armor plating, scoring a hit but not penetrating. The impact sensors in both their armor registered the strike. Point to Kara. The Thraxian roared in anger and swung horizontally, his weapon whistling through the air with terrifying force. Kara ducked under the swing and struck again, this time at his knee joint where the armor was thinner. Another hit registered. Stand still and fight. Varkesh snarled. Why would I do that? Kara replied calmly, circling to his left. That would be stupid. She was using footwork her instructors had drilled into her for years. Constant movement, never staying in one place, always forcing the opponent to adjust their position. Against a larger, stronger fighter, mobility was survival. Varkesh changed tactics, using quick thrusting strikes instead of big swings. His reach advantage meant he could attack while staying outside the range of Kara's shorter sword. Several strikes forced her to parry desperately, the impacts sending shock waves up her arms. But parrying and blocking were costing Varkesh energy. Each powerful strike, each rapid movement, each moment of intense effort was burning through his stamina. Thraxians were not built for prolonged combat. Their physiology favored overwhelming force applied quickly. 5 minutes into the fight, Kara noticed his breathing had become heavier. His strikes were still powerful but came slightly slower. She pressed her advantage, forcing him to keep moving, making him work for every attack. She feinted high, then cut low at his leading leg. The strike connected solidly. She rolled away from his counterattack and came up already moving, circling back to his weaker side. 10 minutes in, Varkesh was definitely slowing. Sweat ran down his scaled face. His weapon felt heavier with each swing. He had probably never fought for this long at full intensity in his entire life. Kara meanwhile was barely breathing hard. Years of endurance training meant she could maintain this pace for an hour or more if necessary. Her muscles were warm and loose, her mind clear and focused. She switched to a more aggressive style now that Varkesh was tiring. She closed distance, forcing him into close quarters fighting where his size made him clumsy. Her sword work became a blur of cuts and thrusts, each strike precisely aimed at gaps in his armor. The score counter showed Kara ahead 23-7. Yield, she said quietly during a brief separation. You fought well, but this is over. Never. Varkesh gasped, raising his weapon again. But his arms were shaking now. When he swung, Kara simply stepped aside and struck his wrist joint. The impact made him drop his weapon. Before he could recover it, her sword was at his throat. Yield, she repeated, not unkindly. Varkesh stood frozen, breathing hard, staring down at the smaller human who had just defeated him. Finally, slowly, he raised one hand in the traditional gesture of surrender. The arena erupted in noise. Some cheered, some sat in stunned silence. Commander Zyxthal stepped forward. Winner, Instructor Dumont. Kara lowered her sword and stepped back, giving Varkesh space. The Thraxian instructor stood swaying slightly, his chest heaving with exhausted breaths. Sweat dripped from his scales onto the arena floor. His weapon lay several feet away where it had fallen from his trembling grip. Commander Zyxthal approached both fighters, his forearms raised for attention. The crowd noise faded to silence. By the rules of instructor combat, this duel is concluded. Senior Instructor Varkesh, do you acknowledge defeat? Varkesh looked at Kara for a long moment. Something in his expression had changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by what might have been respect. I acknowledge defeat, he said, his voice rough but clear. The human fought with honor and skill. Kara removed her helmet and offered her hand in the human gesture of respect. Varkesh stared at it, confused at first, then reached out carefully. His massive hand engulfed hers completely as they shook. You were a worthy opponent, Kara said. You have strength and courage. With proper training in endurance combat, you would be formidable. The Thraxian scales rippled, showing surprise. You do not gloat over your victory? Why would I? Kara replied. You challenged me honestly and fought well. There is no shame in losing when you give your best effort. Varkesh nodded slowly, then turned to Commander Zyxthal. I will submit my resignation as agreed. That will not be necessary, Zyxthal said, surprising everyone in the arena. Instructor Dumont, as the victor, you may waive the resignation requirement if you choose. Kara considered this for a moment. Senior Instructor Varkesh is an excellent teacher of energy weapon combat. The Academy needs his expertise. I waive the requirement. He may keep his position. A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. Varkesh looked genuinely shocked. You would do this? After I tried to have your program eliminated? You believed you were protecting the Academy's standards, Kara said. You were wrong about human methods being primitive, but your intentions were not evil. We should work together, not against each other. The Thraxian was silent for several seconds, then bowed his head in a gesture of deep respect among his people. I misjudged you, Kara Dumont. I misjudged humans entirely. I would be honored to learn from you if you would teach me. The crowd erupted in applause. Students cheered from the stands. Even the instructors who had supported the weapons ban were clapping. It was a moment of genuine unity that the Academy had not seen in years. Over the following weeks, everything changed at the Academy. Commander Zhuangzi called a special meeting of the Faculty Council to discuss the implications of what had happened. The duel had revealed something important about combat training that many had forgotten. Technology is a tool, Zhuangzi said during the meeting. But tools are only as effective as the warrior who wields them. Instructor Dumont has shown us that fundamental combat skills, endurance, technique, tactical thinking, these things transcend technology. The Council voted unanimously to add human historical combat to the mandatory curriculum for all students. It would not replace modern weapons training, but it would supplement it. Every cadet would learn the basics of fighting without relying on electronics, energy shields, or advanced targeting systems. Kara's small office was no longer adequate for her expanded role. The Academy gave her an entire training wing, with multiple rooms for different types of instruction. She began teaching not just crossbows but also sword fighting, spear work, shield formations and even siege weapon tactics. Mikhail became her assistant director, helping coordinate the growing program. Ray Shah, who had shown exceptional talent with medieval weapons, was offered a position as a junior instructor after her graduation. She accepted immediately. Even Varkesh joined the program. The proud Thraxian, true to his word, became a student of human combat methods. He struggled at first with concepts that seemed alien to his warrior culture, but his determination was impressive. Within 3 months he could handle a long sword competently, and he had developed a hybrid fighting style that combined human technique with Thraxian strength. The key, Kara told him during a private training session, is not to fight like a human. You should fight like a Thraxian who understands human principles. Use your natural advantages but apply them more efficiently. Varkesh practiced the half-swording technique she had used to defeat him in their duel. It was a method from 14th century Europe where a fighter would grip the sword blade with one hand while holding the hilt with the other, turning the weapon into a short spear for close combat. The extra control and leverage made it effective against armored opponents. This technique is over 700 years old, Varkesh said, executing a perfect thrust. And I have never seen anything like it in modern combat training. How many other forgotten methods exist in human history? Thousands, Kara replied. Humans spent 10,000 years developing ways to fight and survive before we reached the stars. Every culture, every civilization, every era contributed something. That knowledge does not disappear just because we invented plasma rifles. She walked to the wall of her main classroom, where she had installed a display that now served as a visual history of human warfare. Weapons from different eras hung in chronological order, each with a small plaque explaining its origin and significance. Stone spearheads from prehistoric times. Bronze swords from ancient civilizations. Iron weapons from classical empires. Steel blades from medieval Europe. Crossbows, longbows, halberds and war hammers. Flintlock pistols from the age of gunpowder. Modern firearms. Energy weapons from humanity's first ventures into space. 10,000 years of innovation, Kara said, gesturing to the display. And every single one of these weapons taught us something about combat, about tactics, about human nature. When we forget that history, we lose more than knowledge. We lose perspective. Students often stopped to study the wall between classes. They would ask questions about why certain weapons were designed the way they were, how ancient soldiers trained, what tactics worked against superior numbers or better equipment. Kara answered every question, turning each curiosity into a teaching moment. The Academy's combat tournament the following year looked very different from previous ones. Teams now used mixed tactics, combining energy weapons with crossbows, plasma blades with traditional swords. Shield walls appeared alongside force fields. Students had learned to think creatively about combat, to question their assumptions, to find weaknesses in any defense. Kara stood in the observation gallery during the tournament finals, watching two teams engage in a complex battle that used both ancient and modern tactics seamlessly. Beside her, Commander Zuexthal observed with his usual calm attention. "You have changed this academy fundamentally," the commander said. "Not just in what we teach but in how we think about teaching." "I just reminded everyone of something important," Kara replied. "The best warriors are not the ones with the best weapons. They are the ones who can adapt to any situation, use any tool, overcome any challenge. That has been true for 10,000 years, and it will be true for 10,000 more." Below them, a human cadet executed a perfect half-sorting technique against a shielded opponent, slipping past the energy barrier just as Kara had taught. The cadet's Thraxian teammate followed up with a plasma strike, and together they secured victory. Zuexthal's translator made a sound that might have been amusement. "Senior Instructor Varkesh told me something interesting yesterday. He said that before meeting you, he thought humans were primitive because they remembered their past. Now he understands that humans are advanced because they remember their past." Kara smiled. "That sounds like wisdom. He is learning quickly." He also asked permission to visit Earth during the next academic break. "He wants to study your historical warfare in person, to walk the battlefields where these techniques were developed." "I can arrange that," Kara said. "There are people on Earth who would be thrilled to train a Thraxian warrior in medieval combat. It would be a cultural exchange unlike any other." As the tournament continued below, students and instructors from dozens of different species worked together, learning from each other, combining their unique strengths and perspectives. The wooden crossbows that had once been dismissed as primitive toys now hung with honor alongside plasma rifles in the Academy's armory. Kara thought about the journey that had brought her here, from a combat instructor facing a weapons ban to the director of the Academy's most popular training program. It had started with a simple idea: that old solutions could solve new problems, that history was not just about the past but about understanding principles that never changed. She looked at her classroom wall one more time, at the 10,000 years of human warfare preserved there. Each weapon represented countless lives, countless battles, countless lessons learned through experience and blood and determination. That knowledge was not primitive. It was timeless. And now, thanks to one wooden crossbow and a willingness to question assumptions, the entire galaxy was learning from it.